one of those things that is kind of always looming over you. Are you ever going to be able to afford a house? Are your rents going to increase? You feel like you're not really safe anywhere.
We all know buying a home in the GTA can be almost impossible, but have you tried renting lately?
We had savings, we had good credit, we had people who were willing to co-sign, but we just couldn't find someone who would actually rent to us.
The competition is stiff and prices are through the roof, especially downtown.
Hi, I'm Shannon Martin, and this is Our Toronto. Marivelle is away. We are dedicating our entire show to renting. Over the next hour, we'll look at the extremes some people are going through to deal with sky-high rent. We'll also look at how we got here and talk to the decision makers about what's going on behind the scenes. But first, here's an idea of what renters are facing.
$25 to $34-year-olds in Toronto earn, on average, nearly $2,600 a month. Rent for a one-bedroom condo apartment downtown is up almost 12% from last year to nearly $2,000 a month. Bidding wars that have squeezed some out of home buying are now part of renting, too. The vacancy rate is at a 7-year low, demand a 30-year high. That's partly because so many people are moving in, especially downtown, the place for the young and determined.
Most of the stories we are sharing with you came directly from you, including the tenants you're about to meet.
I'm Amanda, I'm 27. I was born and raised in Toronto. I live with my parents. I work part-time, and I'm just having a hard time saving up for any kind of future in the city.
Stephen Twigg. I'm a freelance illustrator living in Toronto. I used to rent, and for the last year, I've been house sitting / pet sitting for, nonstop.
My name's Nicole. I'm 25 years old. When I first moved in, I was paying $12.75 a month for rent. I just got a notice that my rent was being increased to $1,700 a month.
When you look around here and you see all these buildings, do you picture yourself living down here?
You know, I could never afford to live downtown even if I wanted to. Like, that's my biggest fear in life, honestly. What's my future?
Tough decisions about the city they love. Millennials, 25 to 34-year-olds in the GTA, on average earn $2,582 a month. Rent in Toronto for a one-bedroom condo apartment is about $2,000 a month.
When I was renting with my girlfriend at the time. That ended, and I just thought, I'm not going to take on a huge rent by myself. What are some alternatives? So I thought about house sitting. These cats, let's see if we can find one. People just think, well, I have to rent, so I have to get a job that I don't want, and that's just the flow of it. But you can find other ways, like if you're creative.
I would definitely say I'm a precarious worker. I do have a full-time salaried position, but to kind of make ends meet, I also do tutoring for university and high school students. I'm a freelance editor, and I also have co-authored a few books that I get some income from as well. So I have several different pieces that I kind of have to pull together in order to live.
Real estate agents told you this was perfectly legal.
Mm-hmm.
Which must have been quite a shock.
Yeah, it was totally shocking, and I've never experienced that before. It's always been the mandated increase. I will probably stay with a combination of my friends, my parents, my boyfriend, hop around until I can find something new.
Do you see yourself being able to build a life in Toronto, knowing what you know about rents here?
That's a great question. I think that for sure I will not be renting in a condo again because there's just too much risk to it. It's definitely a possibility that I just will literally not be able to afford to live here anymore.
Despite all those cranes you see in the sky downtown, rental supply is a big issue right now. There was a similar shortage in the 90s, so the province introduced what many now call the 1991 loophole, essentially removing all rent control on buildings built after 1991. We dug around the CBC News archives and have this history lesson. The year was 1997, when hip-hop lost the notorious B.I.G. and the world, the People's Princess. Leo was sailing off into the sunset on Titanic.
I'm the king of the world! there's a chronic shortage of rental units, especially low-rent ones.
And renting in Toronto was headline news.
But the government has a solution. Make it more profitable for builders to build more buildings. To do that, get rid of rent controls and allow landlords to charge whatever they want for rent once a tenant moves out of a building.
Bill 96 does take a seriously flawed system of rent regulation and improves it.
That's Alan Leach, then the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing under the Mike Harris government.
Everything's in the landlord's hands right now. Everything. So if you've got to bring in legislation that levels the playing field, the best thing that can happen for tenants is to have thousands and thousands of more units built. There's thousands of units being undertaken at the present time, and I'm aware of several thousand more units coming on the scene, and I'm talking about rental units here.
That just isn't so. We know that right now there are 114 rental units under construction in the city of Toronto.
If anything, things are worse. 20,000 units are needed immediately across the province. Rents are spiraling upwards, and more than 100,000 people are on waiting lists for affordable housing in Toronto alone.
Even some rooming houses that look like downright dumps, they want $500-600 a month for. So what it is that you get your welfare check, you pay the rent, you're broke.
Ridsdale is caught in Toronto's apartment squeeze. There are cranes everywhere, but all of them are building condominiums. Apartments are scarce.
We pulled some more data for you to see how many purpose-built rentals have gone up since that legislation came into effect. Looking at 2006 and 2016, as you can see, the number of condos built far outpaces rental apartments. We had a chance to ask Ontario's current Minister of Housing about the 1991 rule. Chris Ballard says it exists as an incentive for private landlords to create new rentals. About 50% of all new condo units are bought by investors who then rent them out to tenants. Still, Ballard says the province is trying to do more.
The focus really has to be right now on increasing supply. And we need to make it as easy as possible for municipalities and for landlords to increase the supply of rental housing in the Toronto area and indeed across Ontario.
With rent only rising, some wonder if Toronto is becoming a playground for the rich. Next, we go inside one household where, just to make ends meet, one woman sleeps in the kitchen.
Kitchen, living room, dining room, office, craft area, and her bedroom.
All in one?
Yeah, all in one.
What's it like for you to be in this sort of a space?
Well, I can roll out of bed and make an omelet and then go back to bed. So.
And it is a one bedroom, but you need a roommate to help you get by.
Yes, yeah. And I've looked at some cheaper places, like further out in the city, and not necessarily cheaper, but they might be 2 bedrooms, and then I can share, and the other person gets a door, which is big.
Doors are good.
But if a landlord has 14 offers, they're not going to pick the girl with the disability check as the proof of income. I've been diagnosed with a sleep disorder, I have some autoimmune issues, I have inflammation all the time. Not being able to work is something that I worry about basically all day, every day. The thing I struggle with most is having energy.
Your income to rent is like...
92% of my disability check goes towards my rent. This is the cheapest place I found in Toronto. The rent only goes up 2% every year. I don't want to move, but 92% of my income is not gonna work.
Hopefully in the next year, me and Kat and another one of our friends and my fiance are all hoping to move in together, hopefully into 4 bedrooms so that we can have one extra room that we could possibly rent out on Airbnb.
Whether it's like Uber, Airbnb, like everyone has to do something to supplement, even if they're in a good place.
Mm-hmm. So when you tell me to work more, when you tell my generation we're not doing enough,
Okay, so there's the dream and then there's the reality.
There's a lot of attention drawn to these quirky millennial trends where it's like millennials living out of vans, millennials living 6 to an apartment. It's not that
we want these things. I don't think the dream has changed from our parents' generation. I think if we had the freedom to dream about having a detached house and having those same opportunities, that would be my dream. But we've all had to kind of narrow our dreams down into what is actually possible for us at this time. I would just like to work in my field, be well compensated, afford a place, and be generally happy. That's it.
Yeah.
Aside from just like what can the greater bodies do, it's like what can you do tomorrow if this is happening to you?
Stakeholders on all sides of the rental issue have been responding to our No Fixed Address series. We'll get them around the same table a little later to talk about the problems and some solutions. One of the more obvious solutions is to create more rentals, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Toronto's chief planner, Jennifer Keesmaat, and I spoke about some of the things happening right now that could help. For the people who have been sort of participating in our series who are feeling tight right now, a lot of people say they're having trouble breathing. It feels like their rent is increasing so much, or they're having a hard time even finding a rental. What would you want them to know?
Well, I think it's important to know that the city is actively engaged on this issue, and it's a shared concern. We're not standing idly by and saying, whoa, our market's super hot, isn't that cool? We're actually doing the opposite. We're very concerned. For the first time, really in a generation, we are seeing purpose-built rental coming to the market. So we have developers that are proposing rental buildings. Many of them are market rental. Some of them have a component of affordable rental as well, and that's simply happening in part because of low interest rates. So that too is a good thing. We have 26 rental buildings that are currently in the pipeline or under construction. So that's huge. That's huge. That's very, very significant.
We've certainly heard a lot of the horror stories from people. We've heard from young people who are struggling. But I know behind closed doors, there are things happening in the city.
One of them is inclusionary zoning. We've got a booming market. Inclusionary zoning, or as it's sometimes called, inclusionary housing, is about ensuring that as we build new market housing, that we're also at the same time building affordable housing as a part of every single one of those development projects. And this is not radical. It's done in over 500 cities in the US. It's done in most European cities where every project includes a component of social housing, affordable housing, as well as market housing. Inclusionary zoning is a policy intervention that ensures that the city continues to be a place for everyone. So this is something that's being looked at by the province. We're waiting for draft legislation that's going to be coming out this spring, and it could be a real game changer. The other piece is a program that has been championed by our mayor, the open door policy. And last week we issued an RFP for developers to partner with the city in building affordable rentals specifically. And there's a whole variety of incentives being offered by the city. An expedited approvals process, capital dollars, grants from the federal government and the provincial government that are also matched by the city. That's another way. Offering land, ensuring that land assets that we have in the city are prioritized for affordable housing is another way.
Obviously, you can't get along with everyone all the time, but you treat people with respect and you do your best.
Sharing costs and responsibilities, we look at one cooperative solution to housing in the city right after the break. We asked you for ways you're making it work in the city. One of the more interesting responses we got is co-op housing. Co-ops are not run by big companies or landlords, but by the people who live in them. They aren't out to make a profit, which means rents can be kept down. There are more than 550 co-ops in Ontario, but there are calls for more. Our Dwight Drummond recently met up with Rob Quigley. He's been living in Toronto co-ops for 13 years, and he took Dwight on a tour.
So what we're looking at right here, these are co-ops?
Yes. These are some of our phase 1 units. We've got 81 units in phase 1 spread over, I believe it's 32 different Victorian homes. And then we have 8 infill homes in our second phase, which are filling in and bring us up to a total of 89 homes here at Dodgy.
For those of us who don't understand how co-ops work, explain it for us.
Well, essentially it is a community of people coming together to share resources, provide affordable housing at pure cost basis. So it's the cost of our mortgage, our taxes, our utilities, upkeep, and a reserve fund, and that's all that we pay in terms of our housing charge. There's no profit motive, there's no scalping, we're not flipping homes all the time. So it ends up being much more affordable than a regular housing model would be.
You believe that this is the way to go, why this is a good alternative to get more affordable housing?
Well, it's probably not a solution for everyone, but it is part of the solution for everyone, because it does take some effort to get along with 200 people all the time, obviously, but at the same time, we are delivering housing at a way that has virtually no cost to the public purse. We are providing affordable housing in this neighborhood in a range from like $600 or $700 up to about $2,000, and $2,000 is a 5-bedroom home in our co-op, where a family can live with a grandmother and kids. So that is a huge advantage for people who need to have the downtown services and who are working down here, perhaps not at jobs that pay a lot of money.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Is it easy though for everyone to live cooperatively? It seems like a little utopia you guys have going here.
Well, the problem with co-ops is living cooperatively, and obviously you can't get along with everyone all the time, but you treat people with respect and you do your best. And
so, Rob, who takes care of the gardening? Who does all of this back here? Is this because there's work to be done at this co-op?
Yes.
Do you guys just all pitch in and take care of it?
Yeah, for everything in terms of our grounds and our gardening is done by volunteers. Sometimes there's not enough, but most times there are. And in cases, most people's cases, the gardens in front of their units are looked after by the resident right in the unit.
But the common areas,
people just pitch in and get it done, and it seems to work out well in most instances.
Because you know what you do? You need good people, right? You need good people to decide to live together this way.
The world is full of good people. There's not a problem finding good people.
As you heard Rob say, it's obviously not a solution for everyone. Some feel their only choice is to pack up and leave. The young woman in this next story grew up in the GTA. She wanted to be close to family, but instead, she and her boyfriend chose to move north. I talked to her about making that tough decision. Where are you right now?
I'm in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
And tell us a little bit how you guys ended up there.
I grew up in Scarborough. I went to school for university in Hamilton, and then as soon as I graduated, I moved out to Alberta for work. There was a lot more work out there, and I could pay off my student loans. 4 years later, my boyfriend and I decided to move back to Southern Ontario. That's where our family's from. So we had savings, we had good credit, we had people who were willing to co-sign, but we just couldn't find someone who would actually rent to us. So we found something in Durham, in Pickering, but based on the commuting cost to Toronto, that sort of thing, we did some research and figured that Thunder Bay was more affordable.
What was that process like for you guys to kind of have to shift that vision?
I would like to be around family. If we could make this work in Toronto, that's what I would have preferred, but Thunder Bay is a good place to live. This place is $855. We pay some utilities on top of that. 2 bedrooms, so we have room for when our family comes to visit. Full kitchen, more counter space than I've ever encountered in my life.
When we think about young people trying to work and live here, but you guys are an example that you just decided that you couldn't.
Most of the people I've talked to my age, I'm a millennial, they want to be in Toronto, but they know that they're either going to be there short term or they're going to rent for the rest of their lives. So I think we'll probably see the impact later when my generation is my parents' age and we're looking at retirement and nobody has kind of a way to retire because we haven't invested into anything. We can't invest into housing, which is what my parents' generation did. And because of that, we're paying a lot more in rent, so we're not even able to save that money and invest in a different way.
Some experts warn rising rents will push more younger people like Kayla out of the city, and many of them are using Vancouver as an example of what could happen in Toronto. Dr. Paul Kershaw is a professor with the University of British Columbia and founder of Generation Squeeze. That's a campaign that raises awareness about the pressures faced by young Canadians. So let's start with what you are talking about as a generational ghost town. When you're talking about Vancouver, can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. What we're finding both in the GTA and even more so in Metro Vancouver is that hard work doesn't pay off for younger Canadians in our 20s, 30s, and early 40s like it used to. For instance, it used to take 5 to 6 years to save a 20% down payment on an average priced home in both of these cities. Now it takes 20 years in the GTA, 27 in Metro Vancouver. And as a result, just think about what that means. That means literally young adults are losing decades of hard worked output in terms of trying to make a home. And as a younger demographic tries to cope with that, we're looking for solutions that often push us further from where we work or live, and or we're having to make some real compromises about the space that we try and buy into or rent. And in both cases, the way in which people in their prime childbearing years are having to then think about raising families looks very, very different from what it did just a few decades ago. And as a result, the generation raising young kids today doesn't look like it did back in the day, and hence it's a bit of a generational ghost town.
What is the impact that you've seen on Vancouver? And do you think that, you mentioned obviously how long it's taking to save a down payment in the GTA. Are there warning signs that that's happening here?
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely rapidly catching up to BC in ways that we just desperately don't want it to. When hard work doesn't pay off, then it raises real questions about how the economy is performing. And in both Ontario right now and British Columbia, what's driving growth, something governments typically take pride in doing, is rising real estate prices. But we don't see then employment playing out to the same degree in those sectors. And what it then means is some people are becoming quite wealthy from sleeping and living in their homes and watching television, more often than not an older demographic that bought some time ago, but then their kids and grandchildren, their dreams of how to make a home are being crushed, or they're being weighed down with really heavy debt levels. And for many, they're not going to get into the home ownership market, but still they're then kind of punished with having to pay more than ever for rent. And then it's hard for them to save for their own retirement down the road. This is a real challenge for the generation raising young kids. And then we actually pick up that the kids that they're raising often start in schools in ways that, they're vulnerable, failing and going to jail and winding up sick themselves. So it's an intergenerational challenge, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right, and I know we're going to talk about possible solutions, but I am curious to know, what is the impact on a city if you see younger people, bright young talent, forced to leave?
We often talk about sustainability in terms of environmental issues, and we need to continue to do so. That's critical. But at this current moment, we need to then marry the environmental sustainability conversation with a financial sustainability conversation, because we're squeezing a younger demographic for money, for time, and environmentally. Mm-hmm. And we need to think about how we actually can retain top, well-educated, hardworking talent and not leave them without a fixed address.
So you have an event in Toronto this weekend. The campaign is called #CodeRed.
Yes.
It's calling for policy changes. So give us a sense of what's going to be happening this weekend.
So I can walk into all the policy details of solutions. That's an important conversation. But I guess the punchline is, politics will find solutions to big problems like affordability on housing in the GTA, but they tend to only do so if people organize and show up. Politics responds to those who organize and show up, and a younger demographic has been less likely to cast a ballot on voting day, and even more importantly, less likely to get organized in advance of elections to shape the platforms from all parties. And so what we're starting on this Saturday, and if people want more details, they can go to gensqueeze.ca to learn about our event, Saturday, 3 to 5:30, downtown Toronto. Here we're getting people out a year in advance of the next provincial election in Ontario, and showcasing just how bad the circumstances have become for young Ontarians generally, no more so than here in the GTA, and then helping to collaboratively look at some of the policy recommendations that have been working to some degree in Vancouver and elsewhere, and saying, let's not wait as long as Vancouver did. Let's bring them here now so that the standard of living doesn't free fall to the degree in the GTA that it has in Vancouver. It's about protecting the GTA and ensuring the GTA doesn't repeat some of the failures in Vancouver.
Right, a very important discussion. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your insight with us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And good luck this weekend. You've been sharing your struggles to find affordable and livable housing on our Facebook group, and you still can. Just search Toronto Housing Woes CBC Toronto on Facebook. We'll have a discussion with stakeholders on all sides of the issue coming up right after the break. Let's introduce you to the very smart people who are sitting beside me right now from all walks of life. To my left is Shannon Lee Simmons, familiar perhaps to some of our CBC viewers. You're a financial planner. You have, your family is growing right now, so we'll talk to you about that. You talk to people about real estate. And then we have Preet, you're a personal finance expert. You actually sold your house in 2013 and choose to rent, so we want to hear your thoughts on that. Stephen Scanlon is a landlord. We appreciate you joining us too, because you're able to talk to us. We've heard from a lot of tenants, but we're very interested to hear the landlord side of things. And then Alejandra joins us as well, and she's actually with an organization called Acorn, and you really represent low and moderate income families who see loopholes in the Tenancy Act. So we're going to get your thoughts on that as well. So we're going to start right away, because this series really has taken off, and I think we can probably all agree that there's lots to talk about, and people have been calling it ridiculous. So Shannon, let's start with you. You've seen firsthand, talking to your clients, the effects of buying and how that can really wreak havoc on people's finances, and so you're choosing to rent as well.
Yeah, so I would love to buy a house. It would be wonderful, but I absolutely refuse to buy a house that I can't afford. And in this city, it doesn't matter, I mean, if you don't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to put down, you're dealing with a massive mortgage. And what I've seen too often are these massive mortgages that are locking people into this strain for so long, and there's no emergency fund, there's nothing, and it's a very scary way to live. And so I would rather rent than buy something that I can't afford. But I also feel the rental market is also terrifying, because it's like, what happens if your rent increases, and then where do you go? And given that, like, yeah, I'm pregnant right now, I'm thinking about things like, when I apply for daycare, where should I do that? Where will I live? And that is something that is a whole new element into the rental that I never thought about before, that now is like ooh, it would be nice to own something so that I know where I'm going to live 5 years from now.
Yeah, plan a little bit for your life.
Absolutely.
Yes. For landlords, though, relying on condo investors to supplement the rental market, but I know that comes with a lot of risk to you, and we've run some stories this week about nightmare tenants.
Yeah, so I've owned a little building in Cabbagetown for over 10 years now, and I can say I've run into just about every problem a landlord can run into. Bed bugs, rodents, but I would say by and large my experience with tenants has been very positive. So I think as a landlord you need to be very careful about who you bring into your building. And I'm a human resources professional as well, so I think that has helped me make good choices about who the tenants are. But it's a good business, and like you said, when other people are paying down equity, it's a wealth tool. So, and if you've owned in Toronto at all in the last 10 years, whether rental or personal ownership, I mean, you've done well. So I think it's a great thing to do, but being a landlord has a ton of responsibility. I joined the Landlord Self-Help Center. I was on their board for over 9 years, so I learned both sides of what the rights and obligations are. So I think it's like a business, and if you want to be good at it, you got to know the rules, but you also have to exercise good judgment.
After, I guess, the early 90s, there's no new apartment buildings built in the city of Toronto, and it was left to people to buy condos, and you had a lot of individual landlords in a building, and they were responsible for developing all the new rental stock for the city of Toronto. And those investors need an incentive to buy those units and provide those rental stock for renters. So if you are too restrictive with rent control, you wouldn't buy a new unit today if it was such that you didn't think you could make money. So there's a balance to be found, because you need both the supply and the demand side, right? So it's very tricky.
Yeah. We do have a comment from someone, Fiona, or Sione, sorry if I'm getting that wrong, apologies. But thank you for contributing. She writes, Toronto is no longer a place for the middle-class families, singles starting a new beginning, or newcomers.
Oh, yeah, the single thing for sure. Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is the reality. I can think of a member right now who pays $1,550, 3 bedrooms in Jane and Finch, and it's pretty much the whole pay. So where are we going? We need the rent control. And yes, we want to be fair, but it's a necessity, because if not, somebody mentioned ghost town. Yes, there you go, ghost town.
not only do you increase stock, you increase the affordability for the people who are buying.
When we come back, we'll talk about opening up Toronto's hidden housing stock and how that could help ease the pressure. Our roundtable discussion continues right after the break. We do have a comment from Peter. He says the best way to overcome the rental market in Toronto is to co-rent an apartment or house with a group of good, like-minded people.
Yes, I see this a lot with clients actually. So not only taking on roommates or renting out the basement or taking on, boarders and stuff like that, I'm seeing it more and more as a way to generate cash flow if you own. And if you're renting, I see people who are well into their 30s that still have roommates, but they're happy because they actually can still afford their life and they feel financially secure because they can't not breathe every single month, right? So I think that cohabitating we're going to see more and more of that, just as creative ways that we need to be able to afford life, basically.
Right. And I wonder if there's a role for government to play and things like that, maybe providing subsidies for people that have basement apartments that maybe wouldn't go into that, but with appropriate incentives, you can create a lot of housing stock. There's a lot of second suites in Ontario. The housing, the housing supply completely depends on that, and it's a hidden kind of market. But I wondered if there's a role for government to come in and partner a little bit and provide some incentives for people to be landlords when maybe they never thought they would be one.
A possible solution is to relax the regulations around having an apartment suite, right? So some of these regulations that they insist on can be cost prohibitive. And again, if you're an investor and you're thinking like an investor, you want to make money, those extra costs prevent you from doing that. So if you make it easier for people who are struggling to afford in the first place, but you make it easier for them to subsidize that income by having the ability to rent out a basement suite without having the same regulation that we have in place that might be costly to meet those codes, then not only do you increase stock, you increase the affordability for the people who are buying.
Or support like a fire retrofit or something.
Right.
Let's say the house would lack that, and that's a barrier, and it's fire, you can't mess with that. But if you had some investment from the government that they would sponsor that, you build it in, and then all of a sudden you've got some stock.
I just have to say we're so on the ball. That's something the housing minister has said they're at least going to look at. It won't be the end-all be-all, but it could be just something to help.
We need a coordinated approach. It's not just one silver bullet that's going to fix the problem, right? So we have to look at it from a number of different perspectives. Maybe it's not rent control up until buildings in 2015, but maybe it's 2009 or something. I don't know. And maybe it's reducing the regulatory burden as well. So there's a number of different ways to attack it. I think you have to take that approach as opposed to looking for one solution.
Whether it's on the rental market or for the people out there who do feel right now that they can't breathe, whether it's seniors or people on low income, students or young professionals even trying to make it work. If you guys will just quickly give you all a moment to share your final thoughts. I don't know if we want to start with you, Alejandra.
If you want to really complain and have the determination to complain, vote, and then you can really say something, because if you don't vote, you can't. The other thing is call your MPPs, call the councillors, and tell that you agree with the rental control, with the rent control. I keep hoping for the best, because there are organizations like ACOR Canada that can support you. Thank you so much for the invitation. It has been amazing.
Yes, thank you.
I think I feel even worse about the whole situation after hearing all of you. No, it's a complex problem, and I think the government needs to get at the table and help subsidize those people, because to ask the investor to bear the whole load is too much, and to ask the tenant to continue to pay is unreasonable. So I think there's a role for government to play to help kind of play that middle ground, and for low-income people to help them make a reasonable wage and to be able to pay the rent, because the investors will go elsewhere.
I think that the only solution at home on the kitchen table issue, and not necessarily the bigger public policy piece, is just to get creative. And you've already touched on this a little bit as well, and just potentially some of the, until these bigger things come through and actually make it a livable city again, hopefully, we have to find some way to still save some money just to feel safe, even build an emergency account. And so I would say maybe, you know, adjusting the expectations of what we thought that we might have. That's a very powerful thing to appreciate what you do have, and also maybe getting creative with, if you're able to make more money on the side, if you're capable of doing that, trying that out and seeing how that goes, or sharing costs with somebody. It's a really effective way to build community and keep your costs low until we can have the bigger picture fall into place. Because some of these things might take years and years, and there's people that are living this right now.
I can't thank you guys enough. Shannon, Preet, Steve, Alejandra, thank you so much. Our No Fixed Address series also continues online. For all of our coverage, be sure to head to our website, cbc.ca/Toronto. We'll be right back. For some, Airbnb is a great way to travel or help pay off your mortgage. Others say it's taking money right out of their pockets. An organization called Fairbnb wants the city to crack down on commercial companies they say are taking advantage of the home sharing boom downtown.
I think there are a lot of issues around this, and I think by applying our regulations and the model legislation that we propose, we're able to address all of these issues in a way that allows people that want to share their space to share their space, and you know, it brings those that run commercial businesses back into the commercial fold. And you know, if they want to engage in ghost hotel operations, they should just, you know, buy a hotel and start running a hotel in a legal way, and everyone would be benefiting from that.
The group speaks for the hotel industry and condo boards who are fed up with Airbnb rentals that go wrong. Ali Chiasson takes a closer look at the issue.
How much does this place go for? Well, carrying costs for a client is around $3,000 a month, give or take, so not very affordable, as you can tell. But for Airbnb pricing or Booking.com or any of those other sites, we can rent it out anywhere from $150 a night to up to $400 during high season. I do think we have a problem here in the city, but I don't feel that short-term rentals are necessarily eating into it, because when any kind of rental is, you know, upwards of $1,700 for a one-bedroom shoebox in the sky, I don't consider that affordable for anyone. So whether you're going to Airbnb it, you're not going to make your money back on that. We host responsibly. We screen all of our people. We pick locations that are not going to infringe on the comfort of the neighbors.
So part of it is also Fairbnb wanting Airbnb to just go back to its humble roots, where, you know, a homeowner who wants to rent out a room, you know, they can do that and they can put that money away for their wedding, for instance. But you say that's not so realistic.
Well, first you got to understand, I don't speak for Airbnb. I speak on behalf of short-term rental and vacation rental hosts across the city. We use all the platforms, including Craigslist and Kijiji. But I mean, the cat's out of the bag. It's not going to go back to the way that it was. It never does when there's this disruptive kind of technology. Too many people like it. I love it. I've gotten so many things out of it, and I've been able to create a business around it and hire people and really enrich the communities that we're in.
Demand's going up, and it's from all over. That's actually a good thing. Now we have to make certain that it's sustainable over time, and that's my priority.
Ontario Finance Minister Charles Sousa is hinting the province could work to cool the housing market in this year's budget. In the next part of our series, No Fixed Address, we'll look at home buying. We'll be right back. The GTA has hit another housing high. The average price of a detached house in Toronto is more than $1.5 million. That's a nearly 30% hike. The average detached house in the 905 is now going for more than $1 million. That's a 35% jump from over a year ago. Our series, No Fixed Address, so far has featured stories on renting, but soon we're going to shift gears and go to buying. My colleague Chris Glover is here now. You're leading that part of the project, and I know the response for you has just been overwhelming on this.
Oh, it's incredible. The amount of people that are chiming in with their own stories of the difficulty with these high housing numbers. You just reported on all of them there, but it is astronomical, and that's what we're hearing from a lot of the people who are saying that they're just priced out of the market. So that's one of the concerns we bring. We're also talking to one man in particular who bought a condo and then couldn't afford to live there in his own condo. So what he had to do and what advice is there for people who might be in his similar situation. And then, of course, we're looking at a lot of those first-time home buyers who aren't able to crack into the market, the bidding wars that they're going through. And we're also finding there's a storyline of people who maybe haven't gotten into the market yet. They have some money saved up.
Right.
And we're trying to give them a bit of a sense of what's better for them, to rent and to invest that money, or to buy and invest in equity. And so we have this calculator that we've set up to give people a bit of a sense of what might work better for them. They can put in their own details, and that'll all be on cbc.ca/Toronto.
I'm looking forward to that calculator because I feel like every time I'm out with friends, that's the debate, right?
Absolutely.
Rent or buy. So you touched on first-time home buyers, but it's beyond that too.
Yeah, that's right. So those first-timers who aren't able to crack into the market are being blocked by people who already are in the market. Those people who maybe bought a starter home and then it turned out that that's where their forever home ended up being. So what are they doing to build up that place and give it that extra room for that extra child that they have? And then what are the impacts of that on the market as a whole? We're kind of calling it a two-level of stagnation and what that means for the city of Toronto. We're also going to look at what are some solutions out there. We've talked a lot about a foreign home buyers tax and those different things to increase or to slow the demand. But we'll also look at what issues could be done to help the supply. And I know you talked a lot about that in the rental part of the series, but it's also a huge impact when you're looking at the supply. And then perhaps my favorite part of the series, or a part that might be more fun for people, is some solutions that people are taking on their own. Things like living on a boat, for example, is just one to give a bit of a tease. But there are a number of solutions that people are taking on themselves to try to figure this thing out and move forward.
Yeah. Very much looking forward to that because a lot of creative solutions out there. Quickly tell us how people can take part.
They can take part by going onto our Facebook page and joining in the conversation. We already have over 1,500 people a part of that community now. And so we're obviously encouraging people to continue to join into that conversation. And then if they also would like to reach out to us, they can email us these little videos. We've already had some of them, and I can play one for you now.
Hi, I'm Veronica, and I'm 28 years old.
And I'm Spencer, and I'm 31. After seeing several properties sell much above asking price, we decided it was time for us to put an offer in.
The property sold at $65,000 above our offer and $120,000 above listing price.
Now, this property was a one-bedroom bungalow with a partially finished basement backing onto high-rise apartments.
We finally bought a house.
The thing we wish to pass on to others is get away from this dream house idea. Chances are, if it's a dream house for you, it's probably a dream house for 10 others, and somebody's going to be willing to pay a lot more for it.
Thanks, and good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
Good luck. So it's kind of depressing advice, but that's their advice, and we're encouraging other people to send us those videos and to engage with us, because really all of this series is about the community and what people are talking about as far as housing concerns.
Yeah, and they've been talking to us in an overwhelming way. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm looking forward to your part of the series.
You're welcome.
And that's it for Our Toronto. For now, you can check out much more of our No Fixed Address series on our website. Just go to cbc.ca/Toronto, and you can send me your story idea on renting if you'd like. Shannon.martin@cbc.ca. Thank you so much for watching.